replaced shock. He prepared for an unavoidable confrontation, a meeting where the truth would finally come to light, even if the price was the breaking of a family. A new day dawned, but for the British royal family, it marked the beginning of a necessary purge. William knew he now had enough evidence to take the next step, a move that would forever change the course of this reign. The atmosphere inside the small meeting room at Buckingham Palace was thick with tension, an invisible pressure that made even the slightest sound jarringly loud. Princess Anne sat at the head of the table, her hands clasped tightly on the polished oak surface, her face carved from granite. Beside would shake the very foundations of King Charles's emotions and the public's faith in the monarchy. But he could not allow these treasures belonging to the nation and to history to be carved up and sold off to private collections in the shadows. Resolve gradually seeing through the aristocratic facade to the raw truth beneath. The peak of tension erupted when a draft contract for the sale of a particular asset was projected on the screen. It was an agreement to sell individual Crown Estate treasures to a foreign investment fund with a secret clause specifying that the commission would be transferred to the intermediary account William had discovered. The room froze instantly. Camilla seemed to hold her breath for a moment, her face draining from a healthy flush to a deathly pallor under the electric lights. She tried to speak her explanations, now fragmented, emphasizing a desire to create an independent fund for preserving other heritage sites. But every argument was dismantled by the legal advisors citing strict laws on national assets. William looked at his stepmother, a profound disappointment rising within him. He saw and crossed into serious abuse of power. The atmosphere was no longer a family discussion, but had become a miniature trial. Camilla sat there isolated among relatives who had turned cold. She understood that the protective wall she had so carefully built was collapsing piece by piece. At the end of the meeting, as the folder, the calculation hidden behind the mask of devotion. Each document presented was not merely evidence of wrongdoing, but a cut into the honor of the monarchy he would one day inherit. He noticed Camilla's logic. The legal advisors began summarizing the case in dry but powerful terms. They stated that these actions had gone far beyond normal management. Camilla beginning to make unnecessary movements, adjusting the hem of her jacket aimlessly, flipping through pages, her breathing growing shorter. Her denials weakened under the weight of the emails, financial records, and the former assistant's testimony, all presented with but with hard-earned lessons about loyalty and integrity within the monarchy. After finishing the story, in your opinion, was the decisive action taken by Princess Anne and Prince William in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it. A necessary protection for the future of the monarchy. Or was it an overly cruel purge against the woman King Charles held so dear? Share your thoughts with us. A different tone, a piece built on strict oversight and the lingering ache of secrets that had been laid bare. The new pages of King Charles III's reign had been rewritten not in gold, felt like another stone pressing down on his chest. Charles felt a sharp pain as he realized that the woman he had defied public opinion to make queen, the one who had stood by him, his soul was torn apart by a brutal battle between the heart of a man deeply in love and the reason of a monarch. He looked at the lists of valued artifacts, heirlooms tied to memories of his own mother. Then at the portrait of Camilla on his desk. Each piece of evidence Anne told her she had missed something. She returned to the archive and quickly scanned the crates ready for sealing. There, beneath a gray tarpaulin in a dark corner of the transport warehouse, Zara discovered a series of through countless storms was the very person quietly undermining the foundations of the institution he had sworn to protect. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, Zara Tindall continued her search. The sharp instincts of an athlete website and was sent directly to major news agencies. Phrases such as stripped of administrative authority suspended use of assets, and no longer participating in official duties pressed onto the document, Camilla's controversial era at Buckingham officially ended in quiet disgrace. King Charles returned to his room and asked everyone to leave. In the darkened space, the king buried his head in his hands, allowing pain and betrayal to devour his soul, while outside the world was landed like hammer blows on British public opinion. Outside the palace gates, the atmosphere was one of utter bewilderment. Crowds gathered not to cheer, but about to witness an unprecedented shock from behind the palace's fortified gates. The following morning, the announcement from Buckingham Palace was not released through a grand press conference, but appeared coldly on the official royal family. But she was barred from any public engagements and completely isolated from the management of the monarchy. The notice emphasized that this was a final and irreversible decision. The moment the royal seal was by evening that same day, on behalf of Buckingham Palace, Princess Anne signed the final executive orders. Camilla was stripped of all administrative authority, and of the senior advisors reflected the severity of the situation. The final decision was reached with unanimous agreement. The abuse of Crown estate assets was unforgivable. Legal advisors began drafting the official notice in the sharpest language, and access to royal funds and assets. A brief but heavy statement was prepared for the press. Camilla would retain her title as a final act of mercy from the king. Or the storm of justice swept through. These secrets were too enormous for her to carry alone and far too dangerous to remain hidden any longer. A covert war within Buckingham Palace had officially begun, and Zara Tindall, who had a carefully calculated effort to conceal the truth. This was not a simple clerical error or oversight. It was a systematic plan to strip away the monarchy's heritage. Those old pages still lingering on her fingertips. Instead of returning to her room, she headed straight to the car park and started her familiar Land Rover. On the drive to Gatcombe Park, to find her mother, Zara kept replaying the words in her mind. She knew exactly how Princess Anne would react, a terrifying calm, before she closed the folder and returned it to its exact position, down to the millimeter, erasing every trace of her presence. As she stepped out through the heavy wooden door, the daylight momentarily blinded her. Zara drew a deep breath, the cold touch of the hawk in stunned disbelief. Morning newspapers ran large headlines alongside images of Camilla standing behind King Charles, now split by a symbolic black line, representing the severing of power. Public opinion was deeply divided. Some felt relief at the impartiality of royal justice, while many others be heard. Yet the anxiety over gaps that could not yet be filled remained. Camilla had completely vanished from public view. She was isolated in a private suite where all communication with the outside world and even her former office had been severed. Were shocked by the harshness of the sentence imposed on a queen who had spent decades rebuilding her image. Inside the palace walls, the largest inventory audit in a century was underway. Museum experts and independent auditors, under the direct supervision of Prince William, combed through every corner of the royal residences. They inspected not only jewelry, but every woven rug, every small bronze statue, and every forgotten archive file. The work was urgent, silent, and tense. Each time an artifact was confirmed, secure, a quiet sigh of relief could be. 19th century silver candlesticks and rare oil paintings long considered untouchable. What sent a chill down her spine were the small marginal notes. Several items were marked temporary relocation, yet cross-referenced with the inventory removal logs. There were no return dates. Even more alarming were shipping orders signed by private advisors close to Camilla's office, individuals who held no direct authority over the nation's historic treasures. Zara's hands trembled slightly as she flipped to the next page. Attached conservation plans, as she had expected, but a series of current market valuations for priceless jewels and antiques. The names made her pulse quicken. A diamond brooch from the Victorian era, A set of 18 was a list of private collectors from the Middle East and the United States, alongside staggering valuations far exceeding normal insurance figures. She recalled the hushed conversations over tea at Gatcombe Park a few months earlier. Princess Anne made a dramatic decision that has left the royal family stunned. Exactly what has Camilla done with assets belonging to the British Crown? And could Princess Anne's move mark the beginning of the end for the Queen's position beside King Charles? Zara Tindall, a woman of royal blood who had chosen the free-spirited life of a professional equestrian, had always been one of the few clear-headed members of her family. As the only daughter of Princess, direct, decisive, and fiercely action-oriented. On a drizzly May afternoon, when the signature English rain cast a hazy veil over the palace towers, Zara received a request from her mother to locate a file. Anne and the beloved granddaughter of the late Queen Elizabeth II, Zara held no lofty title, yet she possessed her mother's absolute trust. Their bond was more than maternal. It was a deep understanding between two women who were both power structures long ago. This discovery felt like the final piece completing the dark picture Anne had suspected for some time. Zara did not stop there. She dug deeper into the drawers behind. Beneath a pile of interior renovation invoices lay draft contracts for the transfer of ownership. They were cleverly worded with complex legal terminology to disguise their true purpose, turning. Princess Anne had expressed dissatisfaction with the rather heavy-handed and opaque management style of the new office at Buckingham since King Charles III's coronation. Her mother, known for her discipline and unwavering loyalty to the late Queen's traditional values, had sensed the shift in public assets into private transactions under the guise of disposing of items no longer suitable for display. The meticulous way the files had been mixed in with innocuous administrative documents revealed an effort to update the management of the royal collection, which had become outdated and cumbersome. However, Camilla's composure started to crack when William presented copies of ownership transfer contracts bearing enormous payments to private consultants. Camilla subtly adjusted her posture, her hand unconsciously twisting the ring on her ring finger. She began offering explanations in a low voice, claiming it was all part of a modernization strategy. Signatures from her office. Her fingertips trembled slightly. She tried to maintain direct eye contact with Anne, but she quickly realized that her sister-in-law's silence was far more terrifying than any accusation. Anne did not interrupt. She simply stared at Camilla with piercing eyes, as if came feigned surprise. She raised her eyebrows slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line, as if trying to understand a complex technical issue. When the figures showing anonymous IP addresses, but the remaining footprints pointed to terminals inside Camilla's administrative wing. The investigation reached its peak when they uncovered an intermediary account at a private bank in Switzerland. Under the name of a sham charitable fund, the account had made irregular payments to various art advisors. First anomalies appeared as digital scars. Numerous files recording asset movements had been crudely overwritten or deleted in the early morning hours. The experts traced Anonymous had secretly assembled a small team of his most trusted legal advisors and cybersecurity experts, people completely outside the influence of the Queen's office. They worked through the night accessing the royal family's digitized archive system. William sat before the computer screen, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He saw betrayal not only in the material value, but in the cunning sophistication of the cover-up. The scheme had been built so meticulously after page of asset valuation documents was displayed. The light from the screen reflected on Camilla's face, illuminating every subtle shift in her expression. At first, 6 stacks of documents. When Camilla entered the room, her usual gentle smile faltered slightly at the excessive solemnity of those present. She chose a chair opposite Anne. Her movements beside her was Prince William, maintaining a silence full of authority, yet hiding an inner storm, along with the royal legal advisors holding still graceful, but her eyes could not hide a flicker of unease when she saw the neatly arranged files in front of each person. The meeting began not with polite greetings, but with the appearance of irrefutable evidence on the projector screen. Wooden crates labeled personal office items. Without hesitation, she pried open one of the lids. Her flashlight beam revealed the brilliant blue-green glint of emeralds that had never been displayed in any exhibition. The attached documents showed they were scheduled for diplomatic shipment abroad early the next morning, exempt from inspection. This was the final proof that a large-scale asset exodus was in its final stage of preparation. When Zara's latest findings reached him, the last trace of hesitation vanished from King Charles's eyes, replaced by cold resolve. He stood up and walked to the window overlooking the empty square. Charles understood that if he did not act now, he would not only betray his ancestors, but also sign the death warrant for the monarchy in the eyes of the people. The choice between the woman he loved and the crown had never been so agonizing, but he had no way back. The Royal Council was swiftly convened for an emergency midnight session. The grave face paused at a cabinet reserved for reserve items of the Crown estate, the public assets under the management of the monarchy. There, she accidentally discovered a stack of documents bearing the classified seal of Queen Camilla's office. The find instantly sparked her curiosity. Normally, files related to always been sharp-eyed. The instincts of a top athlete allowed her to notice irregularities that others might easily overlook. As her fingers brushed across the dusty folders, the Queen's personal collection were kept in a separate, more modern section, not tucked away in the shadowy corner of this outdated archive. Zara carefully opened the first folder. Her eyes narrowed at the title Asset Modernization Project, Section A. Inside were not on diplomatic gifts from the 1970s for an upcoming overseas tour. As Zara stepped into the dim space, the mingled scents of old paper and leather created an atmosphere so solemn it was almost suffocating. His face, usually calm and measured in public, now showed deep lines of shock and fury. His eyes scanned the financial tables, each figure striking like a knife into the trust he had placed in his family's stability. The investigation unfolded in the shadows of numbers and command lines. William would leave no room for mercy, because once the gifts of history were turned into commodities for trade, the dignity of the royal family had already begun to crumble. A strictly secret internal investigation, bypassing normal reporting channels because she no longer trusted anyone in the current palace office. She knew every next step would be a life-or-death move. She knew she had to bring William into this, the future king, who held the highest stake and responsibility in stopping this erosion. This investigation. The meeting between Princess Anne and Prince William took place in a room not listed on the official visitor tours of Kensington Palace. William received the folder from his aunt in heavy silence. Collection maintenance had actually been transferred directly to these intermediary organizations. Anne's anger did not explode into noise. It showed in her terrifyingly intense focus. She realized under royal protocol. Anne's actions now were extremely cautious. She understood she was walking a thin line between loyalty to her brother and duty to the crown. She began noting details in a small note moved across the keyboard, cross-checking expenditures from the Queen's office funds. A stark truth gradually emerged: enormous sums disguised under categories like design consultancy fees. Realized that Camilla's control over royal assets had quietly expanded in unusual ways since late 2025. New management decrees issued while King Charles was occupied with foreign engagements had inadvertently given the Queen's office a legal loophole to interfere with the Crown estate. Something strictly forbidden had been damaged in ways that would be difficult to repair. As Zara stepped out of the archive, she looked up at the London sky, turning gray with an approaching storm. She knew that from now on, the palace's peace would carry artifacts now carefully sealed with the red wax of the Crown estate. Zara gently touched the rough wood, feeling the weight of a history and the cost of truth. She understood that no matter how magnificent the palace was, it could never hide its internal cracks forever. The purge was over, but its aftershocks would echo for years to come. The monarchy had proven its ability to cleanse itself in order to survive, yet public trust man's heart. On the final day of that turbulent week, Zara Tindall returned to the Royal Archive. This time, there were no secret missions, only an eerie stillness. She stood among the towering wooden shelves where everything had begun. She looked at the crates of art players in the private art finance world, based in tax havens, and known for discreetly moving assets for the ultra-wealthy. Anne began her own independent review by accessing the internal management system, where she held the highest authority. Her slender but strong fingers, merely gone looking for old documents, had unwittingly become the keeper of the key to the greatest scandal of the new reign. When Zara's Land Rover pulled up in front of the porch at Gatcombe Park, Princess Anne was already standing there, her sharp and every red seal on the documents. Her face hardened the lines at the corners of her eyes, deepening as she recognized the names of the appraisers listed in the files. These were not respected experts from Sotheby's or Christie's, whom the royal family usually trusted. Instead, they were newer. Eyes immediately caught the tension in her daughter's expression. On the smooth wooden table, photographs from the archive were laid out. Anne took her time. She put on her reading glasses and used a magnifying glass to examine every signature. Were closed with sharp snaps. Anne stood